Sorry, these seats aren't for people like you. The gate agent's voice carried across Chicago O'Hare's crowded terminal as she physically stepped in front of two teenage girls. Zara Okafor, 16, clutched her first-class boarding pass tighter. Her younger sister Amira shifted uncomfortably beside her, designer backpack sliding off her shoulder. Around them, other passengers slowed their steps, phones already emerging from pockets. The agent's eyes swept dismissively over the girls' modest travel clothes. She pointed toward the economy boarding line snaking behind them. Your tickets must be mistakes. First class is $3,000 per seat. Zara's hand moved instinctively to her phone. Amira whispered something urgent in her ear. Have you ever been judged by your appearance before anyone bothered to check the facts? These two honor students were about to teach an entire airline a lesson in assumptions. But first, they had to endure the most humiliating 10 minutes of their young lives. This is one of those real-life stories that reminds us why black stories matter. Gate B7 buzzed with the usual pre-flight chaos. Flight 1947 to San Francisco sat gleaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, a Boeing 777 that would carry 312 passengers across the country in 5 hours. Patricia Henley had worked this gate for 12 years, long enough to spot trouble before it started. And trouble, in her experienced opinion, had just walked up to her counter. The two black teenagers approached with the confident stride of first-class passengers, but Patricia's trained eye caught the details that didn't match. Zara wore a simple hoodie and jeans, her natural hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Amira's outfit was equally unremarkable. Sneakers, leggings, a Northwestern University sweatshirt that looked borrowed from someone bigger. Neither girl carried the leather handbags or designer luggage Patricia associated with her usual first-class clientele. No expensive jewelry glinted under the terminal's harsh fluorescent lights. No parents in tailored suits hovered nearby, checking Rolex watches and barking into Bluetooth earpieces. Good evening, Zara said, extending 2 boarding passes. We're ready to board. Patricia barely glanced at the documents. Seat 2A and 2B, prime real estate in United's premium cabin. Her internal alarm bells rang louder. Let me see some identification, Patricia said, her tone already shifting to the suspicious register she reserved for questionable situations. And proof of purchase. First-class tickets cost $3,200 each. Zara's eyebrows rose slightly, but she reached into her backpack without protest. As she dug through textbooks and folders, Patricia caught a glimpse of something that made her pause, an MIT admissions packet, thick and official-looking. But that only deepened her suspicion. Kids with fake tickets often carried props to sell their stories. Here's my driver's license, Zara offered, sliding the plastic card across the counter. And my sister's school ID. Patricia studied the documents with theatrical intensity, as if examining evidence in a criminal case. Zara Okafor, DOB 0315-2008. The license looked legitimate, but that proved nothing. The girls could have borrowed someone else's credit card, booked the seats online, and hoped to slip through security. 3 gates over, Jenny Rodriguez was live-streaming her delayed connection to her 847 TikTok followers when the confrontation caught her attention. The gate agent's body language, arms crossed, chin raised, screamed conflict. Jenny angled her phone discreetly, thumb hovering over the record button. I need to see the credit card used for this purchase, Patricia announced, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. And a receipt showing proof of payment. Amira shifted closer to her sister, 14 years old and suddenly very aware of the stares from other travelers. She'd won the Illinois State Spelling Bee 6 months ago, could spell words most adults had never heard, but nothing had prepared her for this particular kind of scrutiny. We don't have the credit card with us, Zara explained, her voice remaining level despite the heat creeping up her neck. Our father booked these tickets through his corporate account. Patricia's expression hardened. Corporate account, the oldest excuse in the book. Then I need corporate documentation. Purchase orders, business credit card, authorized traveler forms. She rattled off requirements like a customs agent at an international border. Policy requires enhanced verification for unusual circumstances. The word unusual hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made nearby passengers uncomfortable. An elderly white woman in line behind the sisters looked down at her phone, suddenly fascinated by her boarding pass. A businessman in an expensive suit shifted his weight, briefcase clutched tighter. Jenny hit record. The overhead speakers crackled to life. Flight 1947 to San Francisco, we are now beginning priority boarding for our first class and premier platinum passengers. Flight time today is 4 hours and 57 minutes. That's us, Amira said quietly, pointing to their boarding passes. Patricia didn't budge from her position blocking the jet bridge entrance. Instead, she reached for her radio, the black device clipped to her belt like a weapon. Security to gate B7, she said, pressing the call button. Possible fraudulent ticket situation. The words carried across the gate area, causing a ripple of attention. Conversations paused. Phones emerged. Jenny's live stream counter ticked upward as viewers shared the link. 156 watching, then 203, then 341. Zara's hand moved to her pocket, fingers closing around her phone. For just a moment, her composure cracked, revealing the 16-year-old girl beneath the mature exterior. She'd been accepted to MIT's summer engineering program, had scored 1570 on her SATs, spoke 3 languages fluently. But none of those achievements mattered here, not when Patricia Henley had already decided who they were based on how they looked. We have every legal document required, Zara said, her voice gaining strength. Please just scan our tickets and let us board. Patricia crossed her arms. I've called security. They'll sort this out properly. Through the gate windows, baggage handlers loaded the last suitcases into the aircraft's cargo hold. The jet bridge stood empty, waiting for the stream of premium passengers who would board first, settle into their leather seats, and accept pre-flight champagne from smiling flight attendants. Jenny's phone buzzed with notifications. Comments flooded her live stream. This is disgusting. Someone help those girls. What airline is this? Her viewer count climbed past 500. The sisters stood their ground, boarding passes gripped in teenage hands that had never learned they weren't supposed to be there. Around them, the machinery of institutional bias ground into motion, setting the stage for a confrontation that would ripple far beyond Gate B7. But Patricia Henley had no idea what forces she was about to unleash. Hidden in Zara's backpack, beneath the MIT acceptance letter and advanced calculus textbooks, lay a platinum status card that could change everything. And in her contacts list, saved simply as Dad, was a phone number that could bring the entire United Airlines corporate structure to its knees. The clock on the departure board read 6:47 p.m., 10 minutes until scheduled boarding completion. 10 minutes to learn that appearances can be devastatingly deceiving. Security supervisor Jake Morrison had dealt with gate disputes for 8 years. Drunk passengers, oversold flights, medical emergencies. He'd seen it all. But when his radio crackled with Patricia's call, something in her tone made him quicken his pace through the terminal corridor. He arrived at Gate B7 to find a crowd forming. Passengers held their phones at odd angles, pretending to check messages while actually filming. Jenny Rodriguez's live stream had exploded to over 800 viewers, comments scrolling faster than she could read them. "What's the situation?" Morrison asked, his practiced eye taking in the scene. 2 well-dressed teenagers, boarding passes in hand, faced off against Patricia behind her counter-fortress. "Fraudulent first-class tickets," Patricia explained, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd made this call before. "They claim their father booked through a corporate account, but they have no supporting documentation." Morrison studied the girls with the neutral expression he'd perfected over years of airport security work. They didn't match the usual profile of ticket fraud, typically older passengers with obvious tells like nervous sweating or contradictory stories. These 2 stood calmly, the older one checking her phone with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to first-class travel. "Ladies, I'm going to need to see some identification and verify your ticket purchases," Morrison said, pulling out his tablet. Standard procedure for high-value seats. Zara handed over her driver's license again, her movements deliberate and patient. As Morrison scanned the barcode on their boarding passes, his tablet beeped with confirmation. Valid tickets, purchased 6 days ago, seats 2A and 2B, confirmed. But Patricia leaned over his shoulder, whispering urgently about corporate account irregularities and suspicious passenger behavior. Morrison's training kicked in. When in doubt, verify everything twice. The departure board updated. Flight 11847, boarding group 1 now. First-class passengers began forming a line behind the sisters, their irritation growing with each passing minute. "This is ridiculous," muttered a woman in a designer suit, her Hermes carry-on strategically positioned for maximum visibility. "I have a connection in San Francisco." Jenny's live stream peaked at 1,200 viewers. Comments flooded in from across the country. "Call the news! This is 2025, not 1955. Someone tag United Airlines." The algorithm had noticed. Engagement was spiking, pushing the stream to new audiences hungry for real-time drama. At 6:51 p.m., duty manager Carol Stevens received an urgent page. Customer service escalation at gate B7. She grabbed her radio and headed toward what she assumed would be a routine overbooking dispute. Stevens had worked for United for 15 years, climbing from gate agent to management through a combination of efficiency and strict policy adherence. She ran her gates like military operations, on time, by the book, with minimal passenger complaints reaching upper management. She arrived to find Morrison still hunched over his tablet, Patricia gesticulating wildly, and 2 teenagers at the center of an increasingly volatile situation. The boarding line had grown to 12 first-class passengers, several checking their Rolex and Apple Watches with theatrical impatience. "What's the delay?" Stevens asked, her managerial authority cutting through the noise. Patricia launched into her explanation, painting the sisters as sophisticated ticket scammers who'd somehow bypassed online security systems. Stevens listened with the practiced attention of someone paid to make quick decisions based on incomplete information. "Have the tickets been verified?" Stevens asked Morrison. "System shows valid, but they don't have proper documentation for a corporate purchase," Patricia interrupted. "No purchase orders, no business cards, no authorized traveler forms." Stevens studied the girls with the calculating gaze of middle management. Zara met her eyes directly, no defensiveness or guilt in her expression. Amira stood slightly behind her sister, one hand clutching her Northwestern sweatshirt, the other holding her phone with what looked like a text message half-typed. Around them, the situation was spiraling beyond a simple ticket dispute. Jenny's live stream had crested 1,500 viewers, with screenshots already circulating on Twitter. Passengers in the boarding line were growing restless, some joining the filming while others complained loudly about the delay. "Policy requires enhanced verification for unusual circumstances," Stevens said, echoing Patricia's earlier words. "I'm going to need additional confirmation before we can allow boarding." The phrase "unusual circumstances" landed like a physical blow. Zara's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the first crack in her composed facade. Amira looked up from her phone, 14-year-old confusion mixing with dawning hurt. "What makes our circumstances unusual?" Zara asked, her voice steady but carrying a new edge. "We have valid tickets, valid identification, and we're here on time for boarding." Stevens felt the weight of managerial responsibility. Make the wrong call and she'd face complaints from legitimate passengers. Make the right call and she'd protected the airline from fraud. The decision seemed obvious. "I'm calling airport police for additional verification," she announced, reaching for her radio. The words sent a shockwave through the crowd. Jenny's live stream exploded past 2,000 viewers as the story took a darker turn. Comments shifted from outrage to genuine concern. "They're calling the police. This is insane. Someone record everything." But as Stevens raised her radio, something made her pause. Amira was staring at her phone screen, and for just a moment, Stevens caught a glimpse of the contact name. Dad. CEO. Before she could process the implications, the moment passed. Amira's thumb hovered over the call button, her sister's hand gently covering hers. "Not yet," Zara whispered, too quietly for the crowd to hear. The departure board updated again. "Final boarding call, flight 1847. The mechanical voice echoed through the terminal. "All remaining passengers should proceed to gate B7 immediately." Morrison shifted uncomfortably, his tablet still showing valid tickets for 2 passengers who were being treated like criminals. Patricia stood behind her counter, arms crossed in righteous authority. Stevens held her radio like a weapon, prepared to escalate a situation she didn't fully understand. And in the background, Jenny Rodriguez kept filming, unknowingly documenting the opening moves of a confrontation that would reshape how an entire industry thought about customer service, discrimination, and the dangerous assumptions people make based on appearances. The sisters stood at the epicenter of it all, 2 honor students who'd simply tried to board a plane with valid tickets. They carried secrets that could change everything, but those secrets remained hidden for now, buried beneath layers of teenage dignity and carefully controlled emotions. 6 minutes until the final boarding deadline. 6 minutes before Patricia Henley would learn that sometimes the people you dismiss as powerless carry the most power of all. At 6:54 p.m., with 1 minute remaining before boarding completion, Zara Okafor made a decision that would redefine everyone's understanding of power, privilege, and assumptions. She pulled out her phone with the calm deliberation of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Her thumb scrolled through contacts until it landed on a number saved simply as Dad. Around her, the chaos continued. Stevens barking into her radio, Patricia defending her policy interpretations, Morrison trying to maintain order, while Jenny's live stream audience swelled past 3,000 viewers. Zara pressed call. The phone rang twice before a deep, measured voice answered. "Zara, aren't you supposed to be on a plane?" "Dad, we're at gate B7. Her voice carried the particular tone children use when explaining something their parents won't want to hear. "Yes, it's happening again." She listened for 30 seconds, her expression growing calmer with each word from the other end. Finally, she hung up and turned to Amira. 2 minutes, she said quietly. Stevens was still on her radio, speaking in the clipped tones of management damage control. "Need airport police at gate B7 for ticket verification. 2 juveniles with suspicious first-class tickets." Her phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then began ringing with an urgent official-sounding chime that made her pause mid-sentence. The caller ID read, "Regional VP, Operations," and Stevens had never received a direct call from anyone that high in the corporate hierarchy. She answered with the nervous efficiency of middle management suddenly thrust into the spotlight. "Stevens speaking." The voice on the other end was sharp, urgent, and barely controlled. "Carol, what exactly is happening at gate B7? "We have a potential ticket fraud situation. Stop, right now. Do not delay flight 1847 under any circumstances. This is a CEO-level priority directive." Stevens felt the ground shift beneath her feet. In 15 years with United, she'd never heard the phrase CEO-level priority. She glanced at the 2 teenagers who were now watching her with expressions that seemed far too knowing for their ages. "Sir, I don't understand." "You don't need to understand. You need to board those passengers immediately and ensure they receive our highest level of service. Am I making myself clear?" The line went dead. Jenny's live stream had become a phenomenon in real time. Viewers were sharing the link across social media platforms, tagging news outlets, and flooding the comments with increasingly creative theories about what was unfolding. The viewer count had exploded past 5,000, with engagement metrics that would make professional content creators weep with envy. But the real drama was just beginning. Patricia, still oblivious to the corporate earthquake happening around her, continued her policy enforcement crusade. "I don't care who called," she announced loudly enough for the cameras to catch. "Policy is policy. These tickets need proper verification." That's when Zara smiled. It wasn't a bitter smile or a triumphant one. It was the patient, slightly sad expression of someone who'd hoped things might be different this time. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small leather wallet that had been hidden beneath her textbooks. From the wallet, she extracted a platinum card that caught the terminal's fluorescent lights and threw them back in prismatic flashes. Not a credit card, a status card that Patricia had seen perhaps a dozen times in her 12-year career. "Ms. Henley," Zara said, her voice carrying a new authority, "you might want to turn around." Patricia turned. Walking through the terminal corridor were three men in dark suits, moving with the purposeful stride of people who didn't wait in lines or argue with gate agents. The man in the center was tall, perhaps 55, with silver threading through his black hair and the kind of presence that made conversations stop when he entered a room. Behind them, airline employees were practically jogging to keep pace, tablets and radios buzzing with frantic activity. Jenny's phone camera struggled to focus through the crowd, but her viewers were transfixed. The comment stream had become a blur of speculation. "Who is that? This is getting crazy! Someone recognize that guy?" Damien Okafor reached Gate B7 at exactly 6:56 p.m. He surveyed the scene with the practiced assessment of someone accustomed to walking into crisis situations and leaving with solutions. His daughter stood at the center of a crowd of passengers, airline employees, and phone cameras. Patricia Henley was frozen behind her counter, finally beginning to understand that she'd made a catastrophic error in judgment. Damien approached Patricia directly, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made congressional committees take notes when he testified. "Patricia," he said, reading her name tag with deliberate precision. "These are my daughters." The words landed like a physical force. Patricia's face drained of color. Stevens, still clutching her phone, felt her career flash before her eyes. Morrison stepped back instinctively, recognizing the moment when a routine situation becomes a corporate nightmare. But Damien wasn't finished. He opened the leather briefcase carried by one of his companions and extracted a thick folder of documents. "I'm Damien Okafor, CEO of Okafor Industries. Perhaps you're familiar with our company." Stevens was. Every United Airlines manager above her level was familiar with Okafor Industries, a $2.8 billion logistics empire that represented one of their largest corporate accounts. The kind of client that got Christmas cards from the airline's board of directors. "We book approximately 14,000 flights per year through United," Damien continued, his tone remaining conversational despite the bombshell he was delivering. "Our annual contract value is $89 million, making us your third largest corporate client." He turned the folder toward Patricia, revealing contract pages dense with legal text and financial figures. "Section 12.4 of our service agreement specifically addresses discriminatory treatment of account-related passengers. Would you like me to read it aloud?" Patricia couldn't speak. Around them, passengers held their breath. Jenny's live stream had become a social media event, with viewer counts climbing toward 8,000 and screenshots circulating across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok faster than the platforms could moderate them. Damien's legal team, because of course he'd brought lawyers, stepped forward with the fluid efficiency of professionals who'd handled similar situations before. One of them began documenting the scene with a professional camera, while another took notes on a tablet that probably cost more than Patricia's monthly salary. "Mr. Okafor," Stevens managed, her voice barely above a whisper, "we deeply apologize for any misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Damien replied, his tone still calm but carrying an edge that made experienced business executives revise their quarterly projections. "My daughters presented valid first-class tickets purchased through our corporate account. They were subjected to discriminatory treatment based solely on their appearance." He gestured toward the crowd of passengers, many still filming. "This treatment occurred in full view of hundreds of witnesses and was broadcast live to thousands of viewers online. The documentation is comprehensive and, I imagine, quite damaging to United's brand reputation." Patricia finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. I was just following policy. Whose policy requires treating corporate clients' family members as criminals? Damien asked, his question carrying the weight of someone who'd built a multi-billion-dollar empire by asking the right questions at the right moments. The terminal around Gate B7 had gone unusually quiet. Even the ambient noise of rolling luggage and gate announcements seemed muted, as if the airport itself was holding its breath. Amira stepped closer to her father, her 14-year-old composure finally cracking slightly. "Dad, we just wanted to go to San Francisco." Damien's expression softened as he looked at his younger daughter, then hardened as he turned back to the airline employees who'd put her through this ordeal. "My daughters were traveling to visit Stanford University," he said, his voice carrying a new note of barely contained fury. "Zara has been accepted to MIT's summer engineering program. Amira just won the National Spelling Bee. They are honor students, accomplished young women, and American citizens traveling on legally purchased tickets through our corporate account." He paused, letting the weight of their achievements settle over the crowd. "And you treated them like criminals because of how they look." Jenny's live stream had become a phenomenon. The viewer count had crested 10,000, with engagement metrics that were triggering algorithm boosts across multiple social media platforms. #Airline discrimination was beginning to trend nationally, with journalists and civil rights activists taking notice. But the real reckoning was just beginning. Stevens's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed the airline's highest executive level, a number she'd only seen in company directories, never expected to appear on her personal device. The voice on the other end was crisp, urgent, and obviously dealing with a crisis that extended far beyond Gate B7. "Ms. Stevens, you are to provide Mr. Okafor and his daughters with our highest level of service immediately. Whatever they require, whatever accommodations they request, you will provide without question. Is this understood?" Stevens looked at Damien Okafor, who was watching her with the patient expression of someone who knew exactly how this call would end. "Understood," she whispered. The transformation was immediate and total. Within seconds, gate agents were rushing to process the girls' boarding, offering upgrades, apologizing with the frantic energy of people whose jobs had just been saved by executive intervention. But Damien held up a hand, stopping the choreographed customer service recovery. "We'll discuss accommodations later," he said quietly. "Right now, I want to understand exactly how this happened and what you're going to do to ensure it never happens again." The clock on the departure board read 6:58 p.m. Flight 11847 was officially delayed, its 312 passengers waiting while a corporate crisis unfolded at Gate B7. And Patricia Henley, who'd started her shift thinking she was protecting the airline from fraud, was beginning to realize she'd just triggered the most expensive customer service failure in United Airlines' recent history. The next 15 minutes would become a case study taught in business schools, a masterclass in how economic leverage could reshape corporate behavior faster than any lawsuit or public relations campaign. Damien Okafor didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply opened his briefcase and began laying out documents on the nearest departure gate seating area, transforming the public space into an impromptu boardroom. His legal team flanked him with the precision of a military operation, tablets ready, cameras documenting every exchange. "Ms. Stevens," Damien said, his tone carrying the authority of someone who regularly addressed Fortune 500 boards, "I'd like you to call your regional vice president. Tell him Damien Okafor is invoking Section 15.2 of our corporate service agreement." Stevens fumbled with her phone, hands shaking slightly as she placed what would later be described in internal United memos as the most expensive customer service call in company history. While she spoke in urgent whispers to her superiors, Damien turned his attention to the growing crowd. Jenny's live stream had evolved into something unprecedented, a real-time corporate negotiation being broadcast to over 15,000 viewers across multiple social media platforms. "Ladies and gentlemen," Damien addressed the crowd with the calm confidence of someone accustomed to public speaking, "what you've witnessed today is unfortunately not uncommon. My daughters have faced similar treatment at hotels, restaurants, and retail establishments. The difference is that today, we have documentation, witnesses, and leverage." He gestured toward Patricia, who stood frozen behind her counter like a defendant awaiting sentencing. Ms. Henley made assumptions based on appearance rather than facts. She called security, threatened police involvement, and subjected 2 honor students to public humiliation, all while they held valid, legally purchased tickets. One of his attorneys stepped forward, holding a tablet displaying financial data that made Stevens visibly pale. "Okafor Industries represents 0.3% of United Airlines' total annual revenue," the lawyer announced. "Beyond our direct booking contract, our employees and their families generate an additional $47 million in ancillary travel annually." The numbers landed with mathematical precision. Stevens was rapidly calculating the implications, not just the immediate contract loss, but the ripple effect across United's corporate client base. Other major accounts would be watching this situation carefully, evaluating their own relationships with the airline. Damien's phone buzzed. He answered with the casual authority of someone whose calls were always important. "David," he said, presumably addressing United's regional leadership, "I'm standing at Gate B7 with my daughters, your duty manager, and approximately 15,000 people watching this conversation online." He listened for a moment, his expression revealing nothing. "No, I don't think a voucher and an apology will resolve this situation," he continued. "My daughters were subjected to discriminatory treatment that was broadcast live across social media. The damage to both their dignity and your brand is substantial." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll tell you what will resolve this situation," Damien said, his voice carrying the tone of someone presenting non-negotiable terms. "Patricia Henley's immediate suspension pending a full investigation, Carol Stevens' reassignment away from customer-facing responsibilities, mandatory bias training for all gate staff within 30 days, and a comprehensive review of your customer service policies with particular attention to discriminatory practices." Jenny's comment stream exploded with reaction. Viewers were sharing the stream faster than the platform's servers could process the traffic. Airline discrimination was trending nationally, with news outlets beginning to pick up the story. Stevens, still clutching her phone, looked like someone watching her career implode in real time. Morrison shifted uncomfortably, wondering if security personnel would be included in whatever corporate house cleaning was about to commence. But Damien wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he continued, "Okafor Industries will be suspending all new bookings with United Airlines pending the implementation of these changes. Our existing corporate contract contains provisions for service failures that put both our relationship and your stock price at risk." The financial threat was delivered with surgical precision. United's stock was publicly traded, subject to the market's immediate reaction to viral corporate disasters. A major client publicly severing ties over discrimination would trigger algorithmic trading that could cost the airline millions in market capitalization within hours. Patricia finally found her voice, though it emerged as a desperate whisper. "Mr. Okafor, I was just following company policy." "Show me the policy," Damien replied, his tone remaining calm but implacable. "Show me where United Airlines policy requires additional verification for black passengers with valid first-class tickets." Patricia couldn't answer because no such policy existed in writing. What existed was implicit bias, unwritten assumptions, and the kind of discriminatory practices that thrived in the gray areas between official procedure and individual prejudice. Damien's second attorney stepped forward with a different tablet, this one displaying legal precedents and Federal Aviation Administration regulations. "The Department of Transportation has specific guidelines regarding discriminatory treatment of passengers," she announced. "United Airlines is required to provide equal service regardless of race, religion, or national origin. Today's incident represents a clear violation of federal anti-discrimination statutes." The legal framework was being constructed in real time, witnessed by thousands of viewers and documented by professional cameras. This wasn't just a customer service failure, it was becoming a civil rights case study with immediate corporate consequences. Stevens' phone rang again. This time, she answered with the defeated expression of someone who knew the call would bring more bad news. "Yes, sir, he's here. Yes, they're still filming." She paused, listening to instructions that made her shoulders sag. "Understood. I'll inform him immediately." She hung up and approached Damien with the careful movements of someone navigating a minefield. "Mr. Okafor, I've been authorized to offer our complete cooperation with your requests. Patricia will be suspended immediately pending investigation. I'll be reassigned effective tomorrow. The company will implement mandatory bias training within 30 days, and our legal department wants to schedule a meeting to discuss policy revisions." Damien studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "And my daughters? Full apology, first-class upgrade to our premium suite service, and United Airlines will make a $50,000 donation to the scholarship fund of their choice." The offer was substantial enough to make the watching crowd murmur with surprise, but Damien's response surprised them more. "Keep your money," he said quietly. "Donate it to bias training programs for airline industry employees. What my daughters need is dignity, respect, and assurance that other young people won't face this treatment." Zara stepped forward, speaking for the first time since her father's arrival. "We don't want special treatment," she said, her 16-year-old voice carrying remarkable composure. "We want equal treatment. We want every passenger to be judged by their tickets and their conduct, not by their appearance." Amira nodded beside her, clutching her Northwestern sweatshirt with hands that had stopped shaking. "We just wanted to go to San Francisco," she added softly. The simplicity of their request, the basic human desire to travel without harassment, highlighted the absurdity of the entire confrontation. They weren't asking for corporate privileges or financial compensation. They wanted what every passenger deserved: basic courtesy and equal treatment. Jenny's live stream had become a cultural moment. Screenshots were circulating across social media, accompanied by commentary from civil rights leaders, business analysts, and everyday people who recognized themselves in the sisters' experience. Patricia Henley was escorted away by security, not as the enforcer she'd imagined herself to be, but as a symbol of institutional bias being held accountable in real time. Stevens gathered her belongings with the mechanical movements of someone processing career-ending decisions. She'd followed policy, she'd protected the company's interests, she'd done everything her training had taught her. But she'd forgotten the most basic principle of customer service: treating people with dignity. Morrison remained, tasked with ensuring the remaining passengers could finally board their delayed flight. And at the center of it all, Damien Okafor packed his documents with the satisfied efficiency of someone who'd just restructured a corporate relationship in 15 minutes. The clock read 7:13 p.m. Flight 1947 was now 43 minutes delayed, but the sisters would finally be allowed to take their legally purchased seats. The cost to United Airlines, 2 management positions, a comprehensive policy review, mandatory training for thousands of employees, and a viral public relations disaster that would reshape how the industry approached customer service. The cost to the Okafor family? Nothing they hadn't already paid through years of similar encounters. But this time, they'd had the power to demand change, and they'd used it. 3 weeks later, Jenny Rodriguez received a follow-up message that made her original live stream look like a preview trailer. United Airlines had moved faster than anyone expected. Corporate emergencies have a way of accelerating bureaucratic processes that normally take months. When your stock price drops 2% in after-hours trading due to viral discrimination footage, policy changes happen at light speed. Patricia Henley's employment was terminated after a 72-hour investigation revealed a pattern of discriminatory behavior spanning 18 months. The review uncovered 12 documented complaints, all involving passengers of color being subjected to enhanced verification procedures not applied to white travelers with identical documentation. Carol Stevens was reassigned to cargo operations, a lateral move that preserved her benefits while removing her from situations where her judgment could create corporate liability. The message was clear. Discrimination had consequences that extended beyond individual incidents. Jake Morrison kept his job but enrolled in 40 hours of unconscious bias training, along with every other United Airlines employee in customer-facing roles. The program, developed in partnership with the Equal Justice Initiative, cost the airline $3.2 million to implement across their workforce of 93,000 employees. But the real changes went deeper than personnel adjustments. United's technology department worked overtime to develop an AI-powered customer service monitoring system. Every gate interaction would now be recorded and analyzed for discriminatory language patterns. The system flagged conversations containing suspicious verification requests, unnecessary documentation demands, or language suggesting different treatment based on passenger appearance. The program launched with a name that made corporate lawyers nervous but executives love: Equal Sky Initiative. Marketing had wanted something softer, but Damien Okafor's influence extended to branding decisions now. He'd insisted on terminology that acknowledged the problem rather than euphemizing it away. Within 30 days, discrimination complaints dropped 67% across United's domestic operations. Other airlines, watching the positive publicity United received for their proactive response, began developing similar programs. The industry publication Aviation Today featured the story on their cover: How One Viral Incident Reformed Airport Customer Service. The article included interviews with civil rights advocates, airline executives, and customer service experts who praised United's swift response as a model for corporate accountability. But the most significant change was invisible to most passengers. Hidden in the employee handbook revision was Section 4.7, Customer Service Equity Standards. The language was dense, filled with legal terminology and corporate speak, but the meaning was clear. Any employee found guilty of discriminatory treatment would face immediate termination. No warnings, no second chances, no management discretion. Zara and Amira Okafor became reluctant celebrities in civil rights circles. Their father had been careful to protect their privacy, but their dignified response to discrimination resonated with young people across the country. Zara's MIT acceptance became a symbol of potential unrealized. How many brilliant students had been discouraged by similar treatment? Her admission essay, later published with her permission in Black Enterprise magazine, detailed the incident with analytical precision that impressed admissions committees and civil rights leaders equally. Amira's spelling bee victory took on new significance when she used her championship platform to launch the Equal Treatment Education Initiative. Working with her school's diversity club, she developed presentations about unconscious bias that were adopted by middle schools across Illinois. The sisters donated the $50,000 United had offered not to scholarship funds, but to bias training programs for service industry employees. Hotel chains, retail corporations, and restaurant groups began requesting the same training protocols United had implemented. Jenny Rodriguez's original live stream reached 2.3 million views before the platform's algorithms moved on to newer controversies. But its impact lasted longer than viral fame typically does. Screenshots from the stream became teaching materials in business ethics courses. The video was cited in 3 federal discrimination lawsuits involving other airlines. Jenny herself was invited to speak at social media conferences about the power of citizen journalism. Her 15 minutes of fame stretched into a consulting career helping organizations understand how viral content could reshape corporate behavior overnight. The Federal Aviation Administration took notice. Within 6 months, they issued new guidelines requiring all commercial airlines to implement discrimination reporting systems and bias training programs. The Okafor standards, as they became known informally, spread throughout the industry. 12 months after the incident, United Airlines reported their highest customer satisfaction scores in 5 years. Exit surveys consistently mentioned fair treatment and respectful service as improved areas. The company's diversity and inclusion metrics, previously average among major carriers, ranked first in the industry. Damien Okafor's company continued booking flights through United. The relationship, once strained to the breaking point, had evolved into something stronger than a simple commercial arrangement. It became a partnership in demonstrating how corporate accountability could create lasting change. The sisters still traveled together, still faced occasional skeptical looks from service workers, but now they carried something different. Not just their father's influence or their family's wealth, but the knowledge that standing up to discrimination could create ripple effects extending far beyond individual incidents. Their story had become part of a larger narrative about power, privilege, and the responsibility that comes with both. They'd learned that sometimes the most effective response to injustice isn't anger or legal action, but strategic use of leverage to create systemic change. And every time they boarded a plane, walked into a hotel, or faced a skeptical service worker, they carried the quiet confidence of people who'd proved that dignity and determination could reshape entire industries. 2 years after that humiliating confrontation at Gate B7, Zara Okafor stood in MIT's engineering lab, designing propulsion systems for next-generation aircraft. Her younger sister Amira had just been accepted to Northwestern University with a full academic scholarship, her essay about overcoming discrimination resonating with admissions committees nationwide. The viral video that launched their story had long since disappeared from trending topics, replaced by newer controversies and fresh outrage. But its impact continued rippling through an industry that had learned expensive lessons about assumptions, dignity, and the cost of discriminatory treatment. Jenny Rodriguez, now a recognized expert in viral social justice content, often returned to that original live stream in her consulting presentations. Real change happens, she would tell corporate audiences, when people with power choose to use it responsibly. The Okafor family's story had become something larger than a single incident of discrimination. It represented a blueprint for how economic leverage, strategic documentation, and quiet determination could create systemic change more effectively than lawsuits or protests. Damien Okafor still traveled frequently for business, but now he noticed differences in how airline employees treated all passengers. Training programs had worked. Monitoring systems were functioning. The culture of casual discrimination that once permeated customer service interactions had been challenged, and in many cases, changed. His daughters had taught him something unexpected about power and responsibility. They'd shown him that sometimes the most effective response to injustice wasn't anger or retaliation, but strategic use of privilege to create lasting institutional change. The touching stories that emerge from discrimination often focus on individual resilience rather than systemic solutions. But this story was different. It demonstrated how Black stories could become catalysts for industry-wide transformation when combined with economic leverage and strategic thinking. These life stories matter because they show us that change is possible when people refuse to accept "that's just how things are" as an acceptable answer. The Okafor sisters faced discrimination with dignity, used their family's influence responsibly, and created outcomes that benefited thousands of future travelers. Their experience reminds us that real-life stories have power beyond entertainment. When documented, shared, and leveraged strategically, individual incidents of injustice can become movements for institutional change. Today, bias training programs based on the Okafor standards operate in 6 major airlines, 14 hotel chains, and over 200 retail corporations. Customer discrimination complaints across the service industry have declined by an average of 34% in markets where these programs operate. The sisters continue their education, carry their families' values, and occasionally speak at conferences about their experience. They've learned that privilege comes with responsibility, that power unused is opportunity wasted, and that sometimes the most effective way to fight discrimination is to make it too expensive for institutions to ignore. Your voice matters in these conversations. Have you witnessed discrimination in airports, hotels, or retail establishments? Share your experiences in the comments below. Every story adds to the growing documentation of how bias affects real people in real situations. Subscribe for more stories that show how ordinary people create extraordinary change. Share this video if you believe individual actions can create systemic transformation. Together, we can ensure that dignity and equal treatment become standard practice, not special privileges. The next time you see discrimination happening, remember Zara and Amira Okafor. Remember that documentation matters, witnesses matter, and strategic responses can create change that extends far beyond individual incidents. What will your response be?